Karen, thank you for coming back. So, question, you've got a pretty unique role in Gensler. You're an engineer by background.
And architect.
Okay. And so how does somebody move into being a people whisperer? I mean, that's my term for it, but describe what you're doing with Gensler right now. And was it a new position they created for you?
It was a new position. So there was a bit of a transition in my career. So as you mentioned, I did start it in architecture and then engineering. And then I went on my own to do coaching, leadership training, conflict resolution. And actually, Gensler was a client for quite a few years. Yeah. So in 2018, I basically wrote a job description and, reached out to my contacts in the Southwest region and mentioned, I think you guys need this. What do you think? And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I think, what I thought I was going to be doing, which was internal coaching, training and development, leadership coaching, evolved, to really be about shifting the culture and really looking at ways that we could be more inclusive and looking at our systems to see if there was a fair process, for our people to get leadership positions, for bonus allocation, all of those things. And so that it happened just pre-pandemic, I think it was so fortunate, the timing, because when we did get to COVID, I think we were pretty well equipped to navigate, or better equipped, let's say, on a people front to navigate.
So how did COVID either accelerate or get in the way of the process? There were different needs because of COVID. So how did you adapt to that?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When it first happened, it was, I felt a lot of fear, like a lot of people, in terms of how much we had accomplished and what that would have done for us, right? The progress we were making. Especially with those, cultural shifts and things like that, and having to put a lot of things on pause, on hold to reorient, from the types of trainings we were delivering to how we were looking at performance and those kinds of things. And so at first, I think it was a big pause and a rethinking. And then eventually it gave us an opportunity to really lean into empathy and vulnerability and being able to talk about things that maybe before were a little bit more taboo. And it was a lot around also coaching the leadership to promote transparency as much as we could along the way, because there's so much that was unknown. But, the shift, I think, at first was a step backwards. And, it's certainly like coming back, returning to being together. Yeah. It's different, right? And so it's not that the work we did before we threw away. I think it gives us a foundation, but also there's a lot that we just had to, rethink completely.
Now, you had mentioned that you recommended to Gensler that I think you need this. And it's probably true for most architectural engineering firms. Mm-hmm. They don't do a lot of people development or leadership development. What is it that you saw that they needed that they say, yeah, we need this?
Well, I mean, it was at that point I had been doing coaching with them for about 6 years. And so, they were spending a tremendous amount of money, right, of consulting fees with me coming in and doing executive coaching and doing leadership development. But there wasn't, from my understanding, being outside, which ended up being true, there wasn't anyone who was making sure that the process didn't end when, a
when
coaching assignment
went home, that it just, it was a great experience then, but
then how do you keep it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
And then, the training piece, like, ensuring that our talent had the career development opportunities, and we're looking at how do we upskill our talent and, provide trainings, not just the hard skills trainings, but soft skills, right, which became a big focus for me when I started there.
Now, I know you have a real focus on emotional intelligence, and I'm not sure everybody's heard of emotional intelligence, but I'm not sure people know what the components of it are and that it is a measurable thing you can do. So describe that a little bit, because I'm going to lead. Next question is, why do we need it, especially now? But let's talk about what it is.
Yeah, there are different models of EQ as there are, strengths-based assessment type models, right? So for emotional intelligence, there's always two components, though. One is how much you understand yourself, so self-awareness, right? So it's really understanding your internal landscape and having a vocabulary to describe your internal landscape. What am I feeling right now, for example?
Good. I was going to say, describe internal landscape.
Yeah, like what is the emotional state, and what are my body sensations? And it's just it's almost like a meta awareness of your thoughts, right? So it's the witnessing of your thoughts of, I understand I'm thinking this. Where's the thought coming from? And then, the second piece of it, which is the other part of emotional intelligence, and what am I going to do with this information? So that's the managing of the emotional state, right? So it's understanding what it is. So that's self-awareness, and then managing that so that, you are self-restraint, we have self-control, empathy, right? You can take time to listen and understand the other person's perspective, building strong relationships and understanding the expectations of those relationships, making great decisions, even when situations are pretty stressful, and all the way to like flexibility and optimism. That's all part of emotional intelligence.
So I can imagine you being in a room of architects, principals, senior associates, and not everyone's going to just buy into this. And I had a group say, we don't believe in any of this fuzzy-wuzzy, horoscopy, kumbaya, psychobabble bullshit.
I cannot repeat that.
Yeah. So this was not what they were thinking was going to be a good use of time. And they told me directly. So what range of responses have you gotten? And then the tough cases, how do you handle those tough cases?
I think you start with like very tangible examples and practical ways in which emotional intelligence will help the individual, the team, right? So every team has challenges, right?
Yeah.
So let's just start with that. So how you navigate those challenges and the impact that the challenges will have in the team has everything to do with emotional intelligence, right? So can the leader assert the direction without being aggressive, like assertiveness versus aggression? Can people have empathy for each other's perspectives, right? And so you start just sort of taking examples of things that they're dealing with, and you say, okay, here's how emotional intelligence will help you. And you might not even use the language, right? You just help them navigate. And then after the fact, you can have a conversation around, what do you think about building the skills so that next time you know how to handle this, your team knows how to handle this. And so then there's more of an openness rather than, sort of preaching to the choir, a bunch of, fuzzy words, right? It's like, how does it show up every day? You want your team to be more collaborative.
Right.
Okay, well, let's look at how we communicate with one another, and if we're interrupting each other all the time, what does that look like for the individual who's being interrupted? Is that, stopping a person from being able to contribute fully and being fully creative? And what is the end result for your team if that's happening, right? So if you're not taking the best out of people. So I think I didn't come in like I'm going to preach to everybody. It was more like, let me help try and solve some of the challenges that are happening right now. And one of the things that I think was very successful, which I didn't know that was going to be so successful, so I don't take credit for like actually being strategically thinking about that. When I first started, I did emotional intelligence assessments for all of the principals and studio directors across the region. It was more than 80 people that went through this assessment, and we did include a 360 component. But the secret sauce was that I debriefed every single person, and it was confidential. Okay. It wasn't meant to like, we're gonna, tell the leadership like, this is the score and this is what people are saying about you. It just provided me with a one-on-one opportunity with every single person in leadership to talk about professional development and growth opportunities in a very safe context. Right. So even if the scores were hard and the feedback was hard, what I heard during that time from many leaders was, wow, I wish I knew this 10 years ago.
Right, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you use emotional intelligence or any kind of assessment as a developmental opportunity, I actually think that leaders appreciate that, because we're, as you grow in your leadership role, you have, you continue to have blind spots just like everybody else, but you have less people coming to you and telling you your blind spots because of authority, right? I'm much more scared to tell you what I'm seeing. So that was, I think, a very successful strategy that wasn't really strategically planned to have that one-on-one confidential conversation that built so much trust with me and them. They're like, hey, I got your back. Like, even if, I'm seeing some dramatic things here in your assessment, I want to help you, right? I want to support you. So,
plus that was a major, to have that number of leaders experience it firsthand just helps throughout the rest of the organization.
Exactly.
Now, you kind of straddle both. You've got a lot of experience, but also you still have a good touch with the younger employees coming in. What are you seeing as they're coming in, even having been onboarded during the pandemic? What are the challenges they're facing? How is what you're providing, the emotional intelligence training, helping them or could help them?
First of all, I do a regional training that's open for everybody. And the audience is usually more of the early career team members that will, take that on. And they love it. And they love it because it's a moment in time where they have, the opportunity to reflect on things that they probably never learned in school, but also to talk to their peers, sometimes people a little bit more senior to them, and understand, wow, this is that I'm experiencing, other people have it too, or wow, they're thinking about those things, that can really help me. I want to, leverage the lessons learned, because I do breakouts and they're talking to each other, even in a regional context. So I think that the biggest challenge, we've talked a little bit about this before, for those coming into the workforce right now, especially if they started during COVID, is the integration into the culture, right? I think that, being together accelerates that. It's not that it's impossible to do it remote, but it's being comfortable with other people and being comfortable even when the situation is tough and just generally uncomfortable. Like you don't agree with someone or there's a conflict going on. And understanding what your body language and your triggers and your reaction to those things are, because this is the learning ground for anyone starting their careers to being able to manage stress with tough clients in the future, right? So we can't take that away. And I feel like that's the challenge. We have to basically bridge that gap right now.
Yeah, I've had some companies talk to me about these early career people coming out, and there's some of the things they just didn't get in school, some even basic life skills, budgeting, things like that. So how much the bridge between the more senior leaders and the younger leaders, are the senior leaders able to make that bridge, or are you the bridge to help them understand the gap? And we really do have a different kind of crop of early career individuals, generationally, life experience-wise, disruption, all of that stuff plays into. We got a lot of catch up to do with some of these younger kids.
Yeah, I think some people are naturally more open to learning. So, you take a manager or a senior leader who's just more open to listening, to a junior, team member and learning from them. And so we have quite a few of those. And what you see is that in those particular studios, you have higher levels of engagement, higher retention, right? And then there are leaders that, what we try to do is promote opportunities for the exposure and really emphasize the importance of forming those connections. It doesn't matter like how long somebody been at the firm or how junior they are, that getting to know them more personally will help them understand where they're coming from, and then ultimately is good for decision making, right? So when you're having to make a decision for a group of people, the more you know them, the better your decision making will be. So it's really promoting, can we create communities within studios, for example, where we give more early career team members exposure to leadership, opportunities, and not have them just be listeners, but actually have them be active contributors to the conversation, right? So this fly
I see
really
the
likes
fly.
me.
The fly loves you. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you're in a stable with horses.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's not going to look super awkward here. So.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Now, part two, because of the pandemic, we've discovered we have some additional needs. Wellness is a bigger deal, equity, how we're helping people. We're finding the gap. We found a lot of gaps in healthcare, gaps in how resilient we are, gaps in fairness, all of that. So what are some of the things that you discovered that you're now focusing on trying to bridge?
A lot of what you mentioned,
Okay.
but I do want to point out that is important for people to understand that individually and as organizations, we have stages of learning, right? So
Right.
the first stage being unconscious about your incompetency, right? So you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Call it the ignorance is bliss stage. And then there's the awareness piece where now you're being made aware of those deficiencies.
And that's
when
uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable, right? And so I think it's really critical that when you point to the issue, to the deficiency, that you have to remember that this is just the second stage. And, so then it's really about how can we create new habits, right? And are the systems that we have in place going to promote us to, foster the habits that we're saying are important? So it can't end there. That's why just awareness of an issue can actually be counterproductive, because then people feel very reactive, and I've seen that, right?
Right.
Defensive, it's so uncomfortable, and there's denial of the issues, right? So you want to.
It's natural.
It's natural. So I think that you move from that stage to the stage where you actually become excited about the change, is to help them paint a picture of success, right? Of what can this look like once we take full ownership of this, right? So we like talking about innovation, right? In design, right? In many industries. Innovation increases exponentially when we have diverse perspectives around the table. We know that. There's a ton of research on that. But in order for us to get the voices around the table to speak and to feel included, we have to create an inclusive, culture, right? We have to. So you can actually get people to feel excited about creating a highly innovative team or group, and then go back and say, okay, so here's how we get there, right? Here are the changes that we're going to have to do, if we want to be this diverse organization. And so don't forget to go from that stage number 2 to 3, where you're painting this picture with the individual or the organization. And then you're putting all the systems and trainings in place to facilitate, right, and coach people together. And then, lastly, then it becomes new ways of being, right? So that's the first thing. So I think, I think a lot of organizations saw the issue, same with us. And then we're in the stage of creating new things. I think that the biggest gap was how dramatically there was a quote that I heard during COVID that it really stuck with me, that even though we were all under the same storm, we all had very different boats.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it was understanding how vastly different our boats really were and how exposed that became from, our living situations to even our mental, capacity to handle our sort of stress and things like that. So that apparent contrast, it's how do you level out the playing field, so the boat, it's for everybody.
It's so true. I mean, you can bring 10 people in and hear their stories, lost a dog or parent or friend or lost my job or whatever. So unique. And as you say, everybody's support system is different, and everybody's individual capacity is different. So it's challenging, and the challenge goes directly to the management level. They're being asked to do things they've never been asked to do before, not only to get results, but almost to become life coaches. So has some of the focus or your emphasis helping these managers, gain that extra skill level and that awareness level on how to do that?
No, I appreciate the question. I laughed when you said they have to be life coaches. I think the more you are in a leadership role, more your issues are going to be people related, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
But the model is that you're not a people.
Yeah.
You know, you're great technical expert, and people skills are ancillary. Even though we know it's still baked into the system.
Yeah, I think, we do coaching trainings pretty heavily. I run those every year, and then, throughout the year, we continue to develop coaching skills and coaching muscles across the board. Definitely senior leaders, as well. So I think, when you think about coaching skills, it is really about going from the doer, to sort of delegating and asking great questions and giving space. I think that, that is one of the privileges that I hold at Gensler, to be able to coach the leaders when they are in situations where, normally they may not have had somebody to speak about the challenges that they're facing, and then helping them have the conversations or navigate those people-related issues. And so I still play the coach, role internally, and giving, sort of even holding a mirror and helping them gain perspective. But I think people are leaning in. I see a lot more leaders actually leaning in. Used to be that a few people would reach out for support, and now it's like multiple times a day, right. I'll get a phone call. I'm like, I really want to talk to you. There's something happening, don't know how to navigate. And I think that's wonderful. I think just the openness to have the conversation, it's a signal to me that things are changing.
Yeah. So when do you see that your capacity is going to be hit and you're going to have to begin building others in your system?
Yeah. And that's the goal, that as a coach, and this, like we want to, coach them to their full potential so that you no longer need my coaching, right? So, and I see a lot of leaders, just they've taken the stuff so much, they absorbed so quickly, and they are champions of this work. I don't need to say anything. They are doing the work. I can think of quite a few actually principals or, senior associates in the Southwest region that I would highly recommend if people are going through stuff, like talk to this person. Nice. They will help you navigate. So I feel like for me, I've moved from being just a person to more being the connector and being able to help. Like I know who's the resource for you to help you with this.
So to wrap this up, you talked about transformation. That's a big word for a big company. And you've seen some movement. You've seen the needle move in some areas. But let's project out. Say we're here June next year, 2024, and we're talking about where do you hope to move the needle and what's going to move Gensler into that next level of that kind of emotionally intelligent organization?
That's such a really good question. I would love to see that what we are recognizing and celebrating at Gensler moves more and more in the direction of what makes people feel truly included and, the celebrating the culture. And I think we do that, but not at the level that I think we need to be at, where we're paying just as much attention to that as we are to all of the other metrics that moves the business forward.
Yeah. So I'm taking some things away from what you said, the stages of unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence and all the way up. You can almost map where you are in different levels.
True.
as a matrix. So I'm taking that away from our conversation. I like that. And the continued expansion where it's not just you, but now you're the connector, that is interesting as well. For you, what's the next 6 months look like?
I'm growing my team a little bit. And so there is definitely, onboarding new team members and taking on projects that I haven't been able to take on because of lack of support. And one of them is actually we have, 5 years worth of data, right?
Oh, wow.
Emotional intelligence reports. We do studio feedback every year of all of our studio directors. We get feedback from the team members. Basically, it's like kind of a feedback also exercise for all of the studio directors. And I'm intrigued by correlations and obvious gaps. There's some things that I could see as patterns, but I haven't taken the time to really look at data and female and male comparing in terms of leadership skills. Are there things that are predominantly different that we need to pay attention to? Does tenure in the organization shift certain skills? Is somebody coming in and having a certain years of experience and taking on a senior role? Are they going to jump in maybe with better skills or worse skills? So and really, I think understanding what makes it for a really successful contributor at Gensler, right?
Yeah,
so I think we have the data is just really distilling it.
Karen, thank you. I think what you've done for those that are listening is you've opened up a whole new understanding of what a person in your role can bring to a company, because I don't think it's well defined. And I do think that a lot of individuals feel it's a little bit of fluff, but you've got rigor, you've got process, you've got frameworks, you've got metrics that you're bringing to it, plus you're building that trusted advisor capacity in there. So I'm extremely impressed and grateful that you came on the Resilience Lab. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This conversation was wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Take care.